Once upon a time, a king ruled a kingdom. He cared for his people and worked hard every day. His minister was wise and always gave good advice. The minister's wife, Ariana, was from a village nearby. Her father, Johnson, worked as a milk seller. He owned a small cattle farm. Her mother, Elizabeth, was a housewife who took care of their home. They had one son, but he was very lazy. He had no interest in work. He only wanted to have fun and spend time with friends. This troubled Johnson. Elizabeth was stuck in the middle, always trying to keep peace between them. One morning, Johnson woke up and got ready for work. Elizabeth was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Johnson stepped into the kitchen and took a seat. Elizabeth placed the breakfast in front of him. He picked up a slice, spread butter on it, and took a bite. Then he glanced at Elizabeth.
"Where's O'Neill?"
Elizabeth hesitated.
"He is sleeping."
Johnson's face hardened. He put down his slice.
"Wake him up and send him to the farm. I'm waiting there."
Without another word, he stood up and left. Elizabeth sighed and went to O'Neill's room. She tapped his shoulder.
"O'Neill, wake up. Your father is waiting on the farm. He is angry."
O'Neill groaned and turned away, pulling the blanket over his head. Elizabeth shook her head.
"I'm making your tea. Come soon."
Elizabeth made tea again, then picked up the broom and started sweeping. She finished some chores, but O'Neill was still in bed. Sighing, she went to the kitchen and began preparing lunch. After a while, O'Neill finally woke up and came into the kitchen. He yawned.
"Mom, please give me breakfast."
Elizabeth turned to him.
"Is this breakfast time?"
O'Neill shrugged.
"Please. Mom, I'm hungry."
Shaking her head, Elizabeth made tea and an omelette, then placed them on the table. As he finished his breakfast, Elizabeth said,
"Now go to the farm."
but O'Neill shook his head.
"I have to go somewhere. It's important."
Before Elizabeth could say anything, he left. That night, Johnson came home, tired from work. He looked around.
"Where's O'Neill?"
Elizabeth placed the plates on the table.
"He is not at home."
Johnson sighed but said nothing. After a while, O'Neill came. They sat down for dinner. Johnson looked at him.
Why didn't you come?
O'Neill ate a bite and said carelessly.
I was with friends.
Johnson took a deep breath but stayed quiet. Elizabeth didn't look up and focused on her food. One morning, Johnson woke up feeling unwell. He touched his forehead.
Elizabeth. Wake up, O'Neill. I have a fever. I can't go to the farm today.
Elizabeth nodded and went to O'Neill's room. She shook his shoulder.
O'Neill. Your dad has a fever. You have to go.
O'Neill groaned but got up. After breakfast, he went to the farm beside their home. Cows were moving restlessly, and everything was a mess. He sighed.
Oh no! I can't clean this mess.
Sighing, he filled the water troughs and laid out fodder for the cows. Then, he milked only a few cows and opened the shop. Customers started arriving, and soon, the milk was finished. One customer asked,
Is the milk finished?
O'Neill smiled.
Yes. It's all sold.
Another customer frowned.
How can it finish so soon?
A second one added.
This never happened before.
But O'Neill, counting the money happily. The next morning, Johnson went to the farm. He stopped and looked around. The place was a disaster.
What a mess.
He muttered.
Didn't O'Neill do anything yesterday?
Shaking his head, he cleaned the mess and did all the work himself. Then, he opened the shop. A customer complained.
I didn't get milk yesterday.
Another added.
Me neither.
Johnson's face tightened. That night, he scolded O'Neill.
You didn't work at all. Customers are complaining. The farm was also a mess.
O'Neill lowered his head and went to his room. That night, O'Neill thought,
I should go to Ariana's house in the capital. There, I won't have to work.
He smiled to himself. The next morning, he said,
Mom, I want to go to Ariana's house. I will work there, but I can't manage the farm.
Elizabeth nodded. That night, she spoke to Johnson.
O'Neill wants to go to Ariana's house. He says he will work there.
Johnson thought for a moment, then smiled.
Okay.
The next day, O'Neill reached Ariana's house in the capital.
I will find work here.
He said,
I don't want to clean the farm. You know I hate it.
Ariana nodded. When the minister returned home, he greeted O'Neill, then turned to Ariana.
Why is he here?
Ariana explained everything. The minister smiled.
I know him well.
He thought. A week later, on Sunday, the minister said,
O'Neill, go get some groceries.
O'Neill stepped outside to get groceries. The sun was hot, and soon, he was sweating. Day by day, the minister gave him more tasks. One day, O'Neill thought,
I should do the job. At least I will get paid.
He told Ariana.
Please ask brother for a job.
Ariana spoke to the minister. And soon, O'Neill became the royal gardener. O'Neill poured water on the plants, thinking,
If I go back, I will have to manage the farm. If I stay here, I will have to work.
He sighed.
I can't escape from work.